Origin of white cane. This material is taken from the internet and sent to SVH by Sri Vijay Kumar Roth from Berhampur, Orissa. Dedication. The white cane story is dedicated to the memory of Dr. Jacobus, Jacobus, Ten Breck, TEN in small letters, B capital, small ROEK. Ten Breck, blind scholar, educator, author, and leader of the blind. He was the inspirational and moving force in the struggle to gain security, equality, and opportunity for the blind of the world. Preface. To every blind person who is about to undertake the adventure of cane travel, if you have not already been introduced to your white cane, no doubt you soon will be. Your white cane will become a part of your life. It will be your constant companion, your guide, your passport to independence. Of all your personal possessions, your white cane will be the one most closely associated with you throughout your life, throughout the world. We want you to know more about your white cane and about other kinds of canes too. Alone I walk the peopled city, where each seems happy with his own, O friends, I ask not for your pity, I walk alone. Stop. Obadiah, Obadiah, Milton, Milton, Conover, Conover. The White Cane Story, page 1. Did you know that there are probably more than 3 million canes in everyday use in the United States alone? There are many kinds of canes used for many different purposes, from the cane used for added support by the lame or those whose steps are no longer certain, to the many canes, plain and fancy, used simply because they are jaunty and fashionable, to the white cane used by the blind as a bumper, probe, and extension of the senses. In the dim, distant, unrecorded history of the human race, the caveman carried a rough club, CLUB. He used it to kill the game he ate, to fend off wild animals that endangered him, and to fend off his human enemies too. A step beyond the short club was the long club, or quote, stuff, STAFF, unquote, stuff. The caveman could use a stuff 5 or 6 feet long to ease his way over rough ground and up mountain sides, page 2, or to support himself when a leg was injured. Even then, infants were born blind, and children and adults became blind through disease or accident. In those days, the fierce struggle for survival often dictated that those who became helpless because of the loss of sight or for any other reason were killed or left to the mercy of nature or their enemies. But man is endowed with an indomitable will to live, and some of those who became blind must have had the courage to fight for their own survival. They found that long, reasonably straight branches from trees, stripped of their small twigs, could be used both for protection and as a probe into the unknown around them. Thus, perhaps, the first, quote, white cane, unquote, was born. Time passed, hundreds of thousands of years. Man became increasingly able to cope with his problems, to control his environment and thus his own fate. The caveman's crude stuff evolved and became specialized. Page 3. In addition to the stuff carried by the blind to detect their surroundings, there were the shepherd stuff for guiding sheep, the pastoral stuff borne as an emblem of authority, the pilgrim's stuff with a knob in the middle for the grip, the quarter staff, an old English weapon, the alpine stock for mountain climbing, and the simple walking cane, sometimes only an adornment. Throughout ancient literature, many instances are recorded of the blind traveling alone with the aid of nothing more than a cane. People were so impressed by the accomplishments of the blind with only the aid of a cane that the cane became a miraculous gift of God and was handed down as an article of faith. From ancient China, we read of blind beggars and actors who traveled in groups through the country with the aid of, quote, sticks and gongs, stop unquote. Seneca, Seneca, wrote of the blind, quote, leaning on their staves, unquote, in Rome during the 1st century of the Christian era. Page 4. The Greek historian of the 5th century AD, Herodotus, noted that the blind guided travelers across the desert sands of Egypt with uncanny ease and sureness. In every age of ancient history, although most of the blind were reduced to conditions of poverty, slavery, or beggary, instances are recorded of a few blind individuals who rose to positions of prominence and power as philosophers, teachers, mathematicians, musicians, or authors. Democritus, Democritus, the Greek philosopher of the 4th century BC, is said to have blinded himself so that vision would not impair his, quote, mental eye, stop unquote. In the 1st century BC, Cicero, Cicero, had a blind tutor named Diodotus, the Stoic, who taught him philosophy and geometry. Homer was probably ancient history's greatest blind genius. He is thought to have become completely blind before writing his 2 great epic works, the Iliad and Odyssey. Page 5. Only John Milton, who lived in the 1600s, ranks with Homer as an author of great epic poetry. Milton's greatest works, quote, Paradise Regained, unquote, and, quote, Samson Agonistes, unquote, were all written after he had become blind. We do not know if all these ancients carried canes, but from more modern history we have detailed accounts of such persons as John Metcalfe, whose fame spread all over England during the 1700s. He was blinded by smallpox at the age of 6, and 6 months later was exploring the nearby streets without a guide. By 9 he was going all over town alone, and by 14 was diving, swimming, and taking mad gallops on his father's horse. At 19, with a stout thorn stick in one hand and a fiddle in the other, he started walking through England, once covering 200 miles in 6 days. He became famous as a road builder and contractor, living a spirited, robust life to the age of 93. Page 6. About the time that John Metcalf, Metcalf, Metcalf died, Louis Braille was born in the French village of the Coupvray, Coupvray. Shortly before his 4th birthday, he lost the sight of one eye when he accidentally jabbed an awl, AWL, into it. The other eye was lost from infection. At first, the newly blinded child just sat on a bench in his house. By degrees, he learned to do things for himself. Then his father gave him a small stick, and with this he began to explore the outside world. Soon he became a familiar figure on the stony lanes of Coupvray. Louis Braille was to grow up to be a musician and teacher of the blind, and to be immortalized by devising the remarkable system of raised dot writing which you are now reading, Braille. Historical references show that even blind people had different ideas concerning the use of their canes. Some thought its chief use was to chase off dogs and other animals. Others used it to make loud, page 7, noises warning people that a blind person was coming, so everybody could scamper out of his way. Some thought the cane was simply a support against falling, and still others considered it a means of clearing the path of stones and other hazards that might be stumbled over. The modern white cane dates from First World War, when it first became to be used in France and England. Historically, there is some dispute over which country can lay claim to the first use of the white cane. In any event, it became customary for a white painted cane, often with a red tip or red stripe, to indicate that the bearer was blind. Its use spread from Europe to North America. The first special city ordinances regarding the use of the white cane were adopted in this country in 1930. The White Cane campaign then became national in scope, and today all of the 50 states have white cane laws. White cane laws, in general, give the blind bearer of a white cane, page 8, or the blind person led by a guide dog, the right of way over other pedestrian and vehicular traffic. It must be noted, however, that carrying a white cane or being led by a guide dog does not free the blind person from using reasonable caution and responsibility as he travels, or from observing pedestrian traffic regulations. His cane or his dog indicate to others that he is blind and is to be extended reasonable courtesy and caution, but does not free him from responsible action on his own part. The National Federation of the Blind, an organization of blind persons themselves, spearheaded the adoption of white cane laws and the adoption by Congress of every October 15 as White Cane Safety Day. White Cane Safety Day is a reminder to all Americans, blind and sighted alike, that the white cane is a symbol of safety to the blind, to be observed by all, page 9, by all citizens. It is also a means of reminding all citizens of the right of the blind to enjoy the greatest possible measure of personal independence, the right to move about. It was not until World War II that an intensive study of canes and cane travel was made with any considerable number of blind persons. Experiments had been made with various materials in an attempt to find the best kind of cane with black thorn, bamboo, rattan, ash, gum, oak, steel alloys, and many other materials. Even umbrellas were tried as canes for the blind because their steel tips gave a sharp reverberating sound, and when opened, umbrellas were a good indicator of wind currents. But the most frequently used cane was the short wooden cane with a crooked handle patterned after the 19th century walking stick. It was too heavy and too awkward. It became obvious that blinded veterans of World War II needed an adequate cane along with a system of training, page 10, that would teach them to use their canes in a fairly short period of time. A series of studies resulted in the development of the most widely used cane today, the long, thin, straight fiberglass cane. Its length gives the user 2 steps notice of a change in terrain or an obstacle in his path. The material of which it is made is more flexible than other materials and reverberates better against objects it encounters. It is equipped with a tip consisting of a ring of steel clamped around rubber, which increases the sensitivity of the cane. Other widely used and very satisfactory tips are made of plastic. The collapsible cane, made of a series of tubular metal sections usually held together by strong nylon elastic, can be quickly folded or unfolded. It is very useful when traveling in an area where the user may wish, page 11, to store it in a small space under a chair alongside him, on a seat, or in his pocket. Metal telescoping canes made of tubular sections which slide inside one another are also available. There is also a cane which runs along the ground on 2 small wheels. It is useful as a surface guide, but difficult to use as an above-the-ground probe. Experiments are being conducted to discover and perfect new kinds of canes. For example, one, quote, cane, unquote, comma, which has been the object of experiments for some years, uses radar. Echoes bounce back from an object to a cone-shaped, flashlight-sized instrument which emits tones that become lower as the user comes nearer to an object. This instrument only detects objects directly in front of the beam, still leaving the hazard of overhanging objects and surface changes. You will be taught to use your cane correctly. Avoid forming, page 12, bad habits that are hard to undo. The cane can be used efficiently or inefficiently, gracefully or awkwardly. Of special importance, you will be taught to carry your cane and yourself in such a way that you stand tall and dignified and at ease. Using the cane is a skill. It doesn't come naturally. Its chief use is the avoidance of danger. You will learn to survey curbs and steps and walkways in such a way that your cane becomes a special sense to you. You will learn with a great deal of practice that the tap of your cane sets up auditory vibrations from which you can judge distances and even shape location and quality of objects near you. To a degree, You will in time develop your own kind of radar. Bats are blind and are able to avoid objects in their paths by vibrations from those objects. When you have mastered cane travel, you will have gained your independence. You are protected by law when you travel on page 13. When you travel on any public thoroughfare and in any public place, when you are accompanied by your cane, providing you use reasonable caution. It may seem easier to be guided by holding the arm of a sighted person, but it is unrealistic to think of going through life with only this kind of guidance, or that you will want to. So you are about to join some 3 million Americans who carry canes of one kind or another. Your cane will serve you well. It is a very special kind of cane. It is your badge of independence, equality, and mobility. Your white cane is your passport to the world. Page 14, Epilogue by Kenneth Jernigan, President, American Brotherhood for the Blind. Security, equality, and opportunity, the white cane has become the symbol of these precious rights to the blind. Its history has been that of all great social reforms, from a challenge to be met, to experimentation, to custom, to passage of laws of varying effectiveness in the various states, culminating today in the enactment into statute in many states of the model white cane law. Hailed as a civil rights law for the blind, the visually handicapped, and the otherwise physically disabled, the measure makes it the policy of the state that these persons shall be encouraged and enabled to participate fully in the social and economic life of the state. Calling for the cessation of discrimination on the grounds of disability, the statute declares that the blind and disabled have the same right, page 15, as the able-bodied to, quote, full and free, unquote, use of public streets, sidewalks, conveyances, public facilities, and places of public accommodation. The state calls upon the general citizenry to expect to see blind and disabled persons abroad in the community, going to and from the places of their work and recreation, and to take all necessary precautions to secure their safety. Motorists are required to yield the right of way to totally or partially blind persons carrying a predominantly white cane or using a guide dog, and the quote, driver of any vehicle approaching such pedestrian who fails to yield the right of way or to take all reasonably necessary precautions to avoid injury to such blind pedestrian is guilty of a misdemeanor. Stop, unquote. One of the most significant features of the model white cane law is the provision declaring that it shall be the policy of the state that blind persons, page 16, visually handicapped and otherwise disabled persons shall be employed in the service of the state and its political subdivisions, in the public schools, and in all other employment supported in whole or in part by public funds on the same terms and conditions as the able-bodied. The enactment of the model white cane law should encourage employers to modernize and make their hiring practices equitable. The model white cane law, conceived by the late Dr. Jacobus Tenbreck, revered founder of the National Federation of the Blind and past president of the American Brotherhood for the Blind, has already been enacted by 25 states, bringing them into the 20th century with respect to the right of the blind and disabled to live in the world. This is indeed a fitting climax to the long and glorious history of the White Cane. Page 17, Bibliography. Chevigny, Chevigny, Hector and Breverman, Seidel, Braverman, Sydell, Adjustment of the Blind, Yale University Press, 1950. Ross, Isabel, Journey into Light, Appleton Century Crofts, Incorporated, 1951. Butcher, Burtschher, Butcher, William J. Romans Behind Walking Canes, Dorrance and Company, 1945. Tenbreck Jacobus, The Right to Live in the World, the Disabled in the Law of Torts, California Law Review, 1966. Tenbreck Jacobus, He Walks by Faith, Justified by Law, an Address. Zahl, Zahl, Paul A., Editor, Blindness, Princeton University Press, 1950. Degering, Degering, Etta, Etta, Seeing Fingers, David McKay Company, Incorporated, 1962. The reading ends here.